guys, Matt Lemke with your Gamer Goggles, gamer-goggles.com. Today we have flip through on Horror Adventures from Pathfinder, well, from Paizo for Pathfinder. And we're going to start off by taking a good look at the table of contents, which is something I like to do. You start off, you might notice there's no actual character class in this book, but they start off with an introduction on how to play your hero character, cover new rules for fear, sanity, and corruption. They have new rules for different types of races, all the different archetypes. Then they have some feat descriptions, spells and rituals, horror rules, and here is where we're actually going to spend the most time today. Running adventures, gear, bestiary, and inspirations. So I have done this now 4 times, and I cannot keep this to like 12 minutes, so we're just going to touch on a few things. And the other things then you can read in my full written review in about a week. So with every book, they give you a little intro and an explanation of the book, and then they start talking about, in this case, how to play horror heroes. And then they introduce new levels of fear. I actually like this part a lot, so we're going to spend a little bit of time here. They take the existing rules for fear, of shaken, frightened, and panicked, and then they expand on that and they increase it to, I think it's a total of 7 levels for fear, and they divide it into greater and lesser fear. So lesser fear has spooked, shaken, and scared, or if you're my son, scarred. And then greater fear has frightened, panicked, and terrified. Now, before I tell you a little bit of the difference between greater and lesser fear, there is a little bit more work involved in the fear mechanic now, because it kind of works off of leveling, and not like experience leveling, but every time you're exposed to a fear component, if it's of a greater level, you have a chance of inheriting the next level. Basically, lesser fear are things that will affect die rolls and game mechanics in that fashion. And greater fear deals more with the psyche of the character. And then there's sanity rules, which I've read these a couple times now. I don't like them as much as I like the fear rules, but I think that's because I think the fear rules are more universal. Sanity kind of are going to play into a more Cthulhu-esque kind of game, in my opinion, which I don't really play that often. But then there's corruptions. Man, we can spend 20 minutes on corruptions. Corruptions are a template that allow your characters to experience something that they would not necessarily normally experience. For example, a cleric might be bit by a vampire because they were vampire hunting. The vampire feeds long enough, we'll say, for story, that they transmit the corrupt template. Well, they don't transmit the template, but they transmit the curse of being a vampire towards the cleric. And these rules allow for the player to either embrace those things from the vampirism, or to say, no, I don't want it. And it helps create tension within a player, or within a character's psyche. Now, what I really like about the corruptions is that, well, they give you a bunch of them. But that's not the part that I actually like. The part that I like is that you can create your own easily using these as a guide. And you can even apply this template to other things. You can make corrupt traps, for example. Maybe not traps, but like areas, which they actually have other rules for. But I had a really good idea the other day when I was thinking about doing my video, and I didn't write it down, so shoot me. But, you know, there's Hellbound, there's the Hive, there's Ghouls, which you've already seen. You've got Lich. This is kind of an interesting read. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I can't tell you everything. Of course, you've got Lycanthropy. Possessed. This one's kind of fun. This is a corruption, one of the corruptions that can be applied to nearly any game. Now, what's cool about this, too, is you can modify this enough that, depending on how you view possession, you could have items become possessed. And just, I mean, that wouldn't necessarily work for role-playing part, but as a GM who wants something unique like a bag that's possessed, you can apply something like this to it. Promethean, Shadowbound, another interesting corruption. Vampirism, which I think a lot of people understand that, and race rules. Well, basically in the race rules, what they do is they introduce new traits and favored classes for the races that exist within Galaria. And then, of course, there's a lot of archetypes. My actual favorite archetype is the Life Channeler Druid. They use the natural life cycle. Zoom in for you. They use the natural life cycle within its logical conclusion, wow, to generate energy by sacrificing creatures. It's kind of neat. I think it would be a fun druid to play. And then, well, we're going to move right through the archetypes. Another one, I'm a big paladin player, so I kind of like the martyred archetype a lot. I don't think I would ever play it, though. I just like the idea. Feats, there are several good feats in this book. In my opinion, most of the feats tend to apply to a horror adventure, whereas as we move into the spells and rituals, I think these are a little bit more universal and can be used a little bit more creatively than some or most of the feats. But I think spells as a whole should be more universal than a lot of feats in the game. And then, let's see here. Oh, are we into the horror rules? The next big part is Chapter 5, and it's the horror rules. And we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on all of this. I went too far. There we go. You have curses, horrific diseases, environments, flesh warping, haunts, and madness. Madness is something that already exists in the game, and these rules are actually used in tandem with the rules that you can find in the core rulebook. There are some substitutions that you can make, but we'll get to that in a second if we still have that kind of time. Now, curses, this is actually probably my second favorite part of the book. And that's just because they do certain things like, well, here's curse spells, and then they have new curses. But what they did here, am I getting ahead of myself? I'm getting ahead of myself. This is not what I was thinking of. But, yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm thinking of the wrong thing. Sorry about that, guys. But they introduced new curses in the book. I think, no. But basically, curses are among the oldest. You know, they've been around forever. You get to fear all different types of things. And then basically curses stem from magic. So in your game, and this could be in any game, you know, depending on how bad your dude is and what he was into or what they find, you can put curses in your game in several different ways. And this just gives you all kinds of different ways. Like there's a blasted vitality, major hauntings, minor hauntings, different types of hunts. So, you know, and then, of course, you can create your own curses, which I encourage you to do. But, you know, some cursed items they give you examples of, cursed land. And some of the cursed land is really nasty. Oh, something else I should... Nope, not there yet. Horrific diseases. This is actually one of my favorite parts, and this is where I was thinking I was at. Right here, they have kind of like template increases for your different types of diseases. So you have incurable. These are I would call them stages: lethal, lingering, magic resistant, plague. And you think, you know, plague's pretty hardcore in the world, so you might just kind of stop there. But no, not Paizo. They decided to go with ravaging and virulent. Yeah, I'm terrible. I know. But now, with some of the new diseases they introduced, I actually like brain moss quite a bit. Brain moss is a fungus that invades the brain. Usually you get it around other types of fungus by breathing it in. So it's pretty easy to contract. But basically what it does is it makes it harder for your character to fight. And eventually, you pretty much kind of just shut down. So if you become terminal, the fungus has managed to eat your brain. And it's a pretty fungus. It's like a bright blue color. So it's, you can, if you see funny fungus growing out of somebody's ear, you might want to talk to them. That's just a hint for my players. And then, they introduce it. Well, they don't introduce environments now. They're not really new. They've been in role playing forever. They just have some guidelines for certain types now, like divining water. Ooh, I hear thunder. Fearless statue, holy ground, and then they introduce hazards, which are like atmospheric type of things. Animating fog is one of them, and I think of the movie Fog. Polluted cemeteries, fog raises out of it, and it kind of moves through the area. A bat colony, all kinds of cool stuff. And if you're into horror, some of this stuff might be like, oh, I knew that. But what they do is they assign CRs to it for you to play with. They've defined the effects. They've basically given away for everybody on the same page, which in some ways can take away from your game, but for other people, it streamlines it and makes it a faster form of play. So I think they did. Back up the page here. Domains of Evil. Basically, Domains of Evil are areas, the layers, or a great example of one that comes to mind, and it's classic for everybody that started role playing back in the 80s. Is Ravenloft. Castle Ravenloft would be a domain of evil. There's no doubt about it. There's no qualms. And some domains of evil basically become infected areas of evil that twist everything, change the rules of science and physics, whatever you want, basically, for a radius as large as 5 miles. So, that's a pretty big area. And then, then you can play with that a little bit more, increase it and enhance it to cursed domains. And then we have flesh warping, which we'll look at the picture, because this is a pretty cool picture. Flesh warping is basically the changing of your physical body to become more powerful, either through alchemical or magical means, I suppose. And then there's flesh crafting, which flesh crafting basically is the same thing as flesh warping, except it's usually only from one part of your body. So I suppose you could do multiple parts of your body and only call it flesh crafting, but eventually in the end you would be flesh warped. And then of course there's different types of abilities that you can earn from flesh warping. One of those is blinding spittle, which basically you spit and you blind things for about 30 feet. And then after the horror rules, we get into haunts, which haunts basically are an area that is, I don't want to use, where spirits linger. Basically, a haunt is something that's always related to the thing that died there's horror or horrific experience is probably the best way to say it. So there are some samples here. There are some. I really am kind of fond of the Spawn of the Abyss. It makes for a great story. Plus, it makes for a great trap. So if you enter this area, if a sentient being enters this area, a demon is summoned. Pretty cool. And this is probably a picture of it, in my opinion. And then we're going to pop through to the next section, which is Madness. Now, like I said before, Madness is really kind of a Cthulhu-esque kind of game where you want insanity and stuff to be unstable. And these rules work with the rules from pages 250 and 51 of the Pathfinder Game Mastery Guide, plus they incorporate the sanity rules previously in this book, depending on how you want to work things out. Now, there's different levels of we'll start with real quick by reading the Madness stat block. First you have save, and then you have the onset, which is basically the becoming of the, we'll call it an illness for, to understand, and then there's the effect. So basically you have all these lesser madness type of things, and you can have night terrors, so you're not sleeping well. You can have, for greater madness, one of the easy ones is amnesia. Basically, you forget all of your past experiences and you suffer with skill checks. But madness is not something that ooh, that's a cool picture. It's not something that I spend a lot of time on because I am currently not in... Why is my camera crooked? I'm not in a game that would use it, nor do I plan on running one in the near future. So the chapter on running horror adventures is, well, for me it was rather enlightening because I've never run a horror adventure. So there's a plethora of knowledge for me. If you're an experienced horror adventure guy, maybe not as much. Good advice on the horror storytelling and rules improvisation for your campaign. Now, gear, there's plenty of gear. As usual with a themed book, it's geared towards that theme. And let's see. Oh, the only other thing I really want to cover is the, well, there's some cool stuff in the bestiary, but we're about out of time today. So, cool picture of a hive horror. And, well, there's a implacable stalker. And what I really kind of want to share with you, well, here's some simple templates too. I'd missed that before. But what I want to share with you is horrific inspirations. This section of the book, this section of the book, in my opinion, is kind of one of those things that is like for, I'd like to run a horror adventure, but I'm not really sure I know how. So here are a whole bunch of examples on the next 3 or 4 pages of types of inspiration for different types of genres of horror. For example, you have body horror. Well, hey, The Fly comes to mind, right? Hellraiser from Clive Barker. And those are movies. And then down here they have print. So cosmic horror, gothic horror. So gothic horror, here you go. The Bride of Frankenstein. Most of us have heard of that, right? We just don't know how to classify it necessarily. Dark fantasy, The 13th Warrior. I've seen The 13th Warrior. I would have just called it fantasy before looking at this book. So, real quick, what do I think of horror adventures? Well, I have to admit, when I originally bought horror adventures, or heard they were coming out with it, it was not going to be a book that I was going to grab. But I talked to Eric Mona about corruptions at Origins in our interview, and I was pretty much sold on the concept of the book. I do believe that this book can be applied to just about any game, from any game master's point of view. The things that can be introduced to it can be very useful. So, now we'll back up a step. Last week I did Ultimate Intrigue, and I was very fond of Ultimate Intrigue, and I liked it a lot. I was really looking forward to Ultimate Intrigue. I think my expectations for horror adventures, or what I think of the book Horror Adventures, far surpasses Ultimate Intrigue. So if you're a horror individual, this is a definite book for you to have. If you're a GM who's thinking of or wants to run a horror game, definitely a book to have. If you like the idea of corruptions and the way they work, the book is worth it just for that chapter. Thanks for watching and have a good day.